don't see where the fluid's coming from though.
99 Volkswagen Passat. I think this is the 4-cylinder turbo. Today we're going to be doing the rear brakes. Now here's kind of what it should look like. It's hard to see, the sunlight's not good. We've got a pad in there. And then here's what it should not look like. Somehow there's no pad, and it's just now rubbing on the caliper. Okay, we're in the back now. Got one of the caliper pin bolts. Another one's up above. There's a nut holding on the brake line. Not sure what that Torx one is. We'll see if we have to take that off. There's where the brake hose would attach. And then that right there holds on the caliper bracket. There's another one of those up there. The one on top you can't get straight on unless you get this brake hose off. So I just wanted to see what all we got back here, and we'll start taking it apart.
That's lower than gas.
Okay, all these nuts and bolts back here were 13mm, and this Torx up here is a T30. I had backed these caliper bolts out to where I'm sure they're loose, but still could not get this caliper piece to come out of the bracket. So right now we're just taking that bracket completely loose. So that's this bracket. Had to take that brake line loose to get to that top caliper bracket bolt, Allen bolt. Okay, those caliper bolts are 8mm Allen head, and they're pretty dang tight. So you want to be straight on with a long breaker bar type thing. Trying to pry that park brake bracket off the back of that caliper. Wiggle, 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 and there it comes loose. Okay.
Is this something?
You always want to do one side at a time in case something crazy happens, something falls off. At least you can figure out where it went. I took a few pictures first too. There's the assembly. Brake line went in there. Got our caliper pin bolts here. Should have been a pad up here, but there's not. So Now we just gotta figure out how to get that bracket off of that caliper. I don't know why it's being so difficult. Probably because this thing is just pushed way past where it should be. The caliper pin has a 15mm nut. You need kind of a thin 15mm wrench to get on there. Hold that, then turn this bolt and that pin will come loose. They make this nut so damn skinny that I basically had to find the skinniest 15mm I had and then tap it on there with a hammer. Once you've got those two caliper pin bolts out, this entire caliper should be able to be pried backwards. If you're not going to replace the rotor, you don't need to remove the caliper bracket. Working on the top, working on the bottom, get that thing to move back and fall off. And after some hammering and prying, it came off, left the pad in there, and we think we found that mystery spring we had on the other side was part of the pad, so we don't need to worry about that. One rotor just came right off. This one over here is being a little more difficult. So this rotor's is trashed, so we don't have to really worry about, you know, where we hit it. Usually you'd kind of want to hit it up in here to kind of break all this loose. But anyway, just bang around. It'll eventually come off. Like I say, you're not worried about this rotor, so if you have to, you can even come in the back and hit it on the outside. You're not gonna hurt it. It's trash anyway. Took a fair amount of hammering. Mostly in this area, all around, and eventually just falls off. So the new caliper came with all this stuff attached to it. So it looks like this clip right here will push back on that clip, and then we'll be able to just pull this entire mess off of here after getting this cable around some slot or something. Okay, we used a two-man operation to get that cable back in there. Now we've got to put that clip in up here. You could probably have bolted this up to there and then slip that cable in, so whatever works. Clean the grease, anti-rust stuff off of your rotor, both sides. We're really struggling with these hardware clips. I can kind of see where they go in, but they don't snap in. So I mean, nothing's held in place, so you're kind of like, you got all these little loose pieces you're trying to hold together. You can kind of see how this clip would go right here, and you'd think it would snap in there and be held tight. That way the pads would rub on this stainless steel surface rather than ride here on this cast iron surface. But we got to figure out how to keep these clips in place while we put the pads in there. The clip snapped, it would make sense, but being loose in there, it's just hard to figure out how it's all going to go together. Kind of got that clip in there, but you know, it doesn't snap in place, nothing holds together. It just seems like it's going to cause more trouble than it's worth. I mean, you could try putting a little grease behind them and hopefully kind of gluing them in place a little bit, but I'm about ready to just put some grease on the cast iron surfaces and go without them, because I'm sure those weren't in the old ones that we took out. I see what they're there for, but they just don't clip in place. You didn't want to hold that rotor on so you got one less thing to fight moving around on you. So we've got one bolt hinging this caliper in there. Put a pad in place on the slide.
Need to put the pad in on this side.
Okay, then we'll slide the pad in over on this side. And get it to where it's rubbing on the guide.
I'm doing this blindly. There we go.
Okay. Now we got both pads in there. And of course one fell out. But you want those springs spread, because they're going to ride on either side of this groove up here. Then you spring down, and those pad springs should end up like that. So those are straddling the groove. Now we're going to try and slide in this stainless steel hardware. So there's that hardware, stainless steel hardware in place, and then he's holding this one in place up above. We got the back pad in with the clip, stainless steel clip up above, stainless steel hardware clip on the bottom. Now I'm going to try and slip this outside shoe on. If we leave that hardware out, the shoes fit in there great. If we put the hardware in, we can't get the shoes in there. So I took the shoe pad over to the vise, carefully clamped it in the vise, took a file and took just a little bit off of it. We'll go ahead and put some grease on that. Okay, after a little custom filing on that shoe to gain some clearance, we've got them both slid in and they're in that hardware. Now I'm going to take a toothpick and just put a little bit more brake grease in the channel of that hardware, right where those tabs slide. So now we've got those two shoes in there, got the hardware in place, put a little grease in the slides, and then those springs are spread, and now we're going to try and flip that clamshell down over the top of them. Those springs should straddle that slot, not stick up, but straddle that slot. Then once everything has fallen into place, we'll put this back bolt in. We torqued that caliper bracket to about 40 foot-pounds. I think from the factory they put Loctite on those, blue Loctite. 40 foot-pounds should keep them from moving. These other little ones, I wouldn't go much over 25 to 30 on these little caliper pin bolts. Now on this other side, we didn't need to replace the caliper. It hadn't worn down to the point of damage, so we are going to have to use that tool to retract that plunger. So we rented a tool to do that, so we'll show you how to do that. And then in these, I took some brake clean, squirted in there, and then took a brush ran in and out, got those good and clean, and now we're going to clean and grease up the guide pins with a special high temp brake grease. I also took this over to the grinder, cleaned the rust off of here, off of this bracket. Alright. There are some flat spots on those pins, but they don't appear to fall into grooves. It looks like it's just a place for the grease to kind of collect and move. That little boot will eventually pop over the end there. Okay. We're ready to go. So we've got this little tool set up. Alright, well we got the caliper bracket on. And we've got the caliper just, you know, snugly bolted to it. We'll tell you how to do this tool here more in a minute. But basically, you have to hold this nut on the outside, which is 22 millimeter, this one right here. You hold that still while you turn this T-handle on the end.
I lost it.
And that spins that master cylinder back into its hole. So it's applying pressure and spinning at the same time. Kind of a pain in the butt. You got to get the right head on your tool so it falls in the slots of that piston on the master cylinder. So you got this tool here. That thing has to fasten on. Then you put the attachment on the end. That has to match. That has to match the notches there, and then this plate will apply pressure from here. So you got to be pushing on that piston and turning it, and if necessary you hold this with a 22 millimeter wrench so that you're applying pressure and turning while you're pushing that cylinder back into the caliper.
Turn it down. Put your little light.
It does come with some instructions, so you can follow those. Should help you figure it out. Okay, it's driven all the way back in. Before I drove it in, I took some silicone spray, went all around that boot to kind of clean it up and lubricate it, so when it went back in there it wouldn't bind. Just wanted to show that you can get this rotor out of there and in there. There's no pads right now, so it's working. But usually you'd have to take this bracket off before you could get that rotor out. But with no pads, it'll go in and out. Crazy, this stupid caliper bolt. You need to like take one of your 15 millimeter wrenches and like stick it in a grinder and make it skinnier, because it'll pinch it in there and you won't be able to get it out. So we have to kind of try and just barely put it on, get everything tight, and then wiggle the wrench out. I've got my one-man bleeder system set up here. So we've got a little fluid in the bottom with the tube sticking in it. The tube comes up, goes over and down over the bleeder screw. You want to put your wrench on first and get it in a position where you can get it tight or loose, tight or loose. This tube fits over there real good, so now you just leave it loose. Now he's been pumping for a while, but go ahead and pump a little bit more. For a while you'll just see bubbles in your bottle, and then eventually you'll start seeing bubbles coming out of here. And just keep pumping. Keep pumping. We've already had quite a few bubbles coming through here, so we may be all the way there, but for a while you're just going to see a bunch of bubbling going on down here. And then finally you're going to start to get some fluid. Then you want to keep doing it until you get nothing but clear fluid. A couple more times. I want to see we got no more bubbles. Okay, and then I'm just going to tighten this down.